Problem 1 of the review problems. Consider the numbers square root of 3, 6, 2.5, pi, and -5 in the sets N, Z, and Q. Complete the following table by placing a tick in the appropriate box if the number is an element of the set. First, let's remember what each set is, and hopefully you have a way of remembering these. N is not so hard, right? Natural numbers. Z is integers. And Q is rational. And remember, R is real, it's not rational. Okay, so what's an example of a natural number? Natural numbers are the numbers that we learned at the very beginning, the numbers that, people that in very primitive societies would need to know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? The only number that's maybe not so obvious is 0. Okay, that took a long time for people to figure out. So natural numbers are starting at 0 and counting by ones, whole numbers. What's the difference between natural numbers and integers? Integers include the negative numbers also. So you also have the negative numbers and 0, and you have the natural numbers. What about rational numbers? Rational numbers are what you get when you divide two integers. So if you have a rational number, you can always express it as a quotient or a division. Well, that's where the Q comes from. So, and don't be confused because a whole number, any whole number, can also be expressed as a quotient. You just put a 1 on the bottom and it's a quotient. Okay? So, even a whole number is a rational number. Okay? The only thing that's not a rational number is a number that can't be expressed as a fraction, which would be something irrational, like pi or square root of anything that's not a perfect square. Okay? So these numbers are irrational. Okay, that was our review. So now let's go ahead and see what's what. Well, we know that square root of 3 and pi, these are irrational numbers, so it's not natural, it's not an integer, and it's not a quotient or rational number. So these are all not in the sets. 6. 6 is a natural number, right? And once you figure out it's a natural number, you already know it's an integer and a rational number also, because all the natural numbers are integers, and all the integers are rational numbers. And remember, we could write something like this. 6 is an element of the natural numbers. 6 is an element of the integers. We could also write something like the natural numbers are elements of the integers. Okay. So the 2.5 is not a whole number, so it can't be natural. It's not an integer either because it's not a whole number. But can it be expressed as a fraction? Yeah, 2.5. Any number that has a fraction in it, even a mixed number, can be a rational number. In this case, it would be 5 halves, right? So yes, it is. -5. -5 is not a natural number because it's negative, but it is an integer, right? Because it's a whole number, negative. It's a rational number because any integer is a rational number. So do you see how like any integer is a rational number? Any natural number is an integer and a rational number. And any fraction which is not a whole number is just rational. Okay? So those are our answers here. Okay. Moving on to number 2. Calculate 3.7 times 16.2 squared minus 500, writing your answer correct to 2 decimal places, correct to 3 significant figures, and in the form a times 10 to the k, where a is between 1 and 10, k is an element of the integers. Okay, so just remember, This is scientific notation. IB is never going to say the phrase scientific notation. They're always going to say it like this. And I want you to understand each part of this. This is basically just saying, hey, I want it in the form 3 times 10 to the, like, 8th. Okay? And if you can see, the K is the 8, right? And the A is the 3. Okay, so basically what it's saying is, this number where the 3 is, it has to be a number between 1 and 10. Between 1 and 10. Can it be 10? No, it can't, because it doesn't say less than or equal to 10, it says less than 10. So it can be 1, but it cannot be 10. It can be 9.9999. Okay? So 3 is fine. It's between 1 and 10. 8 is fine. It's an integer because the k value has to be an integer. Okay? So you can't have this. 3 times 10 to the 1/2. You can't have that, right? Because that's not an integer. You cannot also have 32 times 10 squared because 32 is not between 1 and 10. You cannot have 10 times 10 to the third because 10 is not between 1 and 10, not including 10. It has to be less than 10. Okay? That's a 10, not a 16. Okay, so that was reviewing scientific notation. Now, the only tricky part about this is to make sure that you use parentheses when you're supposed to. Okay? And in this problem, you probably will get the right answer even if you don't use parentheses, but you should be really careful about it. Remember PEMDAS, there's no parentheses here, but the next thing you want to do is the exponent. So you want to have this happen first. And then what do you want to have next? The multiply or the subtraction? Well, in PEMDAS, multiplication and division happen left to right after the exponent. So this would be second. And then the addition and subtraction would happen last. Okay? So you just need to make sure that that's going to happen in the order that it's supposed to. And probably if you type in your calculator without any parentheses, it would happen. But we just need to make sure. Okay, so we're going to type it in as it says. But we need to be careful about parentheses. And if you have parentheses here, you don't actually need to put a multiply sign, but you can. You could put times, and we could put 16.2 squared. Okay, and then at the very end, we want to do minus 500. According to PEMDAS, it's going to happen in the way you want because the calculator is going to do the multiplication before it does the subtraction. The calculator does obey PEMDAS, but the problem is a lot of times with division, like a fraction symbol, or with exponents, sometimes we don't put it in a way the calculator is going to understand. So let's try that. We're going to do that. We get 471.028. And that we'll write down all the digits now because they're going to ask us to round and we want to start with all the digits. Now, what if we had put parentheses? Because we want 3.7 times 10 to the 16.2 to happen first, right? 16.2 squared to happen first. Or we want it to happen before the subtract 500. So I'm going to write it more specifically. I'm going to put and I'm going to insert parentheses there, and then I'm going to put a parentheses after the 16.2 squared. Okay. And I still get that. So this is not a very tricky problem because even if you had just typed it in pretty much the way you, without any parentheses, it's going to come out the same way. Okay? So usually on the IB exam, they'll try to give you a problem where if you're not careful with the parentheses, there is going to be a problem. Okay? Let's see, correct to 2 decimal places. So now we're going to figure out where is 2 decimal places. So that would be 2 decimal places means 2 decimal places after the decimal. So I would keep the 0 and the 2. I'm just going to have to decide, is the 2 going to stay at 2 or is it going to be a 3? Well, I look at the next number, the 8, and I can see that it's bigger than 5, 5 or bigger. So I'm going to change that number to a 3. So this is the result for 2 decimal places. Then I'm going to say correct to 3 significant figures. You're always going to take the first 3 significant figures. Okay, so this would be the first one, this is the second one, this is the third one. So we're going to keep 471. We're going to decide, do we keep the 1 or do we round it up to a 2? The next number is a 0, so it's going to stay a 1. So we just put 471. Make sure you do not put 0.0 or 0.00 because the last significant figure is 1. So that means that the last number that you're going to have here is going to be the 1 itself. Okay? So this is going to be 3 significant figures. And then lastly, it says to put it in scientific notation. And you can use a calculator to do that if you are not confident or you want to make absolutely sure you get it right. So you do mode and you change to scientific. And then you just type in the number. We'll do second quit to get out. And then we'll type 471. And we'll see what it looks like in scientific notation. 4.71 times 10 to the 2. Okay, so the E means times 10 to the E. Okay, so it just gives you the scientific notation already. And that's the answer for B2. 4.71 times 10 squared. And then the answer for B1 was 3 significant figures, 471. The answer for A was 2 decimal places, 471.03. Let's go back and check that. Yeah, A was 2 decimal places, B1 was 3 significant figures, and 2 was scientific notation.